Hi, Florence. It's Ed Tyll again. We're live on Starcom. How are you today?
Ed, so wonderful to hear your voice again. How are you?
Oh, it's a pleasure. How was your weather in the Windy City today? We're very mild here on the East Coast.
Well, we are a little cold today, but, for Chicagoans, 40 degrees, like 38 degrees is kind of like a heat wave. So it's a little cold, a little overcast, but, we heard that, Groundhog Day meant that we were getting spring soon. So, of course, we're thinking that's coming right to us over in the Windy City.
Well, all I'm thinking about is when I used to make my walk from the Wrigley building to the John Hancock building. It could be 60 or it could be 16. I never knew from day to day or week to week, so it's a pleasure to hear you from my old hometown.
Well, we sure do love it over here in Chicago. And the difference between 60 and 16 is so funny because you'll still find people wearing shorts. They just will not surrender to the cold weather here.
That's the city of big shoulders. That's the one I know. Listen, being a nanny is such a great thing. Your background is both in philanthropy and originally as a nanny. What drew you to that? And then we're going to talk about some of the great films that have portrayed the nanny and kind of get you to review them. But how did it become a part of your life?
Being with children has always been so important to me. From an early age, I was always going to the toy store to get baby dolls, and I called the toy store the hospital. I'd come home and make handmade birth certificates for the children, for my baby dolls. And so I always wanted to be taking care of kids. And that just translated in my life then as, 11, 12 years old, started as a mommy's helper and really shadowing those moms and seeing what it's like to take care of children. And then, through my teen years and into my adult years, making it a real profession and staying connected to children even after I've retired as a nanny has been important to me as well, which is why writing the book, Nanny and Me, was a huge moment for me because it meant that I got to still see the children. I got to still have some sort of relationship with them and still talk about things that were important to me during my time as a nanny. And then in terms of philanthropy, my brother, 17 months younger than myself, is autistic. And I'm 30 years old, so he's an adult with autism. And it always was important to me at a young age to teach others about how to give back and how you don't have to have deep pockets in order to make a difference. And so that really played into my life in a big way. And so I've tried to find ways to kind of marry all of my passions. And so nanny and philanthropy kind of just become a way to define my life.
Now, this connection that you have from early in life with kids, this comes up all the time with parents, new parents, expectant parents, and sometimes it's one parent who's worried about this. Does everyone come equipped as an adult with a knack for taking care of the kids, or is the nanny for time and memoriam been sometimes the one key element of, when new parents are not so good at it, you can make your child's life amazing, or you can kind of flub and fumble through because you're not suited for it. Kind of explain that a little bit. What is the gift of being good with kids?
It really depends on your heart. It always comes back to where kind of children live within your heart and soul. And new parents, sometimes they've had no experience with children whatsoever. I have had friends where they're like, I have never even changed a diaper, Florence Ann, and now I'm about to have a baby. And you just kind of laugh because in my world, oh my gosh, the diapers that I've changed, but not everybody was a nanny. Not every new mother was a nanny.
Right.
And, I sometimes have to remind myself of that. And there is something that clicks, I think, when you become a parent, something just kind of this internal, instinctual moment where you kind of know what you need to do to care for this child. But that doesn't mean that you know everything. There are books out there, there are nannies out there are people out there to help you. And my job as a nanny, I always felt, was to kind of assess the family situation. see what was going on in that family dynamic and where could I kind of, sprinkle my magic? Where could I make the most of that relationship with the parents and make the most relationship with the children, and also help the children and the parents have the strongest relationship? So when you're looking for help, in your life as a parent, you should never feel badly about wanting to ask for advice or remembering this wonderful phrase, which is, I know what I don't know. And there are plenty of things we don't know, but there are other people that do, and they can help give you some different examples and different ideas so you can get creative. And then that means that you, the parent, are doing the best thing for your child because you're trying to develop their world as completely and as beautifully as you possibly can.
Oh, wow. Florence Ann Romano is our guest, the Windy City Nanny. You should go and follow along with us at windycitynanny.com. All right, so we're going to talk about movies that are well-known and portray the nanny role. My favorite, right, because of my age, is Mary Poppins. I went to see Mary Poppins with my parents as a kid. I think we might have seen it at Radio City. And you just fall in love as a little kid with the qualities of Mary Poppins. So now that we have some perspective, tell me, does she emblemize the great nanny? Is Mary Poppins a good guide? Is that a good film to show kids? Say, you know what? Here's what a nanny is all about. What do you think of Mary Poppins?
That's my absolute all-time favorite in terms of nanny movies, and I think I always go a shade deeper. That I'm always guilty of doing that, but I think that with Mary Poppins and all of these movies, you're looking for themes. You're looking for relatable themes. That's why a movie touches you in the way that it does, because you're feeling like you can relate back to it. And so with Mary Poppins, I think it's wonderful also to mention Saving Mr. Banks that just came out a couple years ago, and that talks about Walt Disney's creation of Mary Poppins. But the reason I mention it is because when you look at Mary Poppins and how we all idolize kind of that sort of nanny, she is talking about something that's very important, and that is the relationship of the parents and the children. She's really there to help the father and the father's relationship with the children. And I love that idea that she's there to kind of make everything better, to kind of make everything whole and sprinkle magic around, and also teach discipline as well. One of my favorite lines that she says is, in every task that needs to be done, there's an element of fun. And I believe that wholeheartedly, and that's one of my big mantras as a nanny, is that you can teach children responsibility through fun, connecting with play. Right. And she does a beautiful job of that in Mary Poppins, and also, like I said, develops this theme of making the family unit whole and secure and beautiful.
Is she, like I thought as a kid, Mary Poppins, the style that she knows everything? You can ask her any question.
Oh, I know everything too, though. Don't you worry about that.
Right. So is that part of being a good nanny? You just have to be worldly. You have to know all kinds of trivia that kids are coming into contact with.
I think children appreciate looking at a role model and thinking that they're kind of omniscient in that way. And one of the tricks every parent has, of course, is, when a child asks the question and they ask why, because I said so, or because this is the reason, and you just kind of give them a reason. I think Mary Poppins has a great way of having an answer to everything, but as you watch it as an adult,
right,
her answers for everything are not necessarily pointing the child in a direction of changing their mind or their opinion. It's getting them to think about how they feel about the world or the situation. So she's challenging them in that way. And I think that's a really important lesson.
What do you think of Robin Williams' portrayal of Mrs. Doubtfire? Because that really comes, right? That comes very emotionally loaded, right? He's not able to see the kids. He's going to go into disguise, and he's going to go all in so the disguise really works. It's a lot of work on the part of Robin Williams. And then he's going to have a broken heart when he's witnessing something that he can't personally access. So go ahead, run that movie down for, again, parents who might show it to the kids. What's good in there for households and families?
And I want to make sure parents, of course, and any, caretaker, who might be listening, you're always making sure that the video, that the movie that they're watching is age appropriate. There are themes in movies that you need to make sure that you, if you're watching it with them, are able to explain, and if you're not watching it with them, that you're able to answer questions. So I think that's always something, good
Now,
thing
does
to
that
remember.
apply? I want to be specific. Does that apply to Mrs. Doubtfire? Should people think twice about what age? Please go ahead and tell me.
Yeah, I think that Mrs. Doubtfire definitely has an age limit on it. I think anyone probably above of 10 years old or so probably would be able to watch that and be entertained by it. It's always funny when you watch movies as an adult when you actually pick up on humor and you're like, oh my gosh, I never would have gotten that as a child. That went right over my head.
Right.
And that's the beauty of children. And I think a lot of things like that would go into Mrs. Doubtfire. But with Mrs. Doubtfire, I think definitely over the age of 10. And in that movie, Robin Williams does such an amazing job. What an amazing late great actor. But what he really does in that movie that is so interesting to me is you look at the character of Sally Field, his ex-wife, and this is a big theme that I'm seeing in families today, and probably a long time ago, but something that we're looking at more seriously now. When you're interviewing a nanny and you want to bring them into your family, you want them to be an extension of you, an extension of your family's values. And Sally Field felt very strongly about what she wanted this caretaker to be like. And Mrs. Doubtfire embodied that for her. That's why she loved her so much. She was an extension of her values. She was raising the children in a way that Sally Field was comfortable with. So that is a very important lesson for parents to look at and see. That's exactly what the type of relationship you want to have with your nanny is the type of relationship you had with Mrs. Doubtfire before she was revealed in the end as her ex-husband. But that person that she encapsulated really was someone that Sally Field could connect to and felt secure with being around her children. That is a big theme there in Mrs. Doubtfire that I think is overlooked, and that's a great lesson for parents.
Now, the discipline issue is always touchy for, let's just face it, even for parents it is, but especially with the nanny. Tell me how that is negotiated by a non-parent, but certainly a member of the household. And how do you feel the movies have really portrayed that? You mentioned a little bit about Mary Poppins. Tell me if you see anything in Mrs. Doubtfire that's a guide, like a good guide for prospective parents about disciplining kids.
It's a fine line, and there always will be a fine line, and that's why the transparency in the beginning of that relationship with your nanny, even when you're interviewing them, that's really where you need to have the first conversation about discipline, because there could be a family that believes in spanking their children, and you don't believe in that at all. And so if you, the nanny, don't feel comfortable with the discipline that they're going to enforce in that family, then that is not the family for you, and then vice versa. If the parent doesn't, if a nanny is explaining how they feel about discipline and timeouts or to spanking to anything else, and the family doesn't agree, then that's not the nanny for you either. You need to be on the same page. So in looking at these movies, you're looking at Mary Poppins versus, Mrs. Doubtfire. Mary Poppins, in London at that time, it was a very different world in terms of what role that nanny played in their life. So the parents weren't as concerned really with the onboarding of that nanny. They hired that governess, that nanny, to come in and really raise the children, and they were supposed to be firm and strict and proper. And then you look at Mrs. Doubtfire, it's a more modern version of it. This is a kinder woman who was gentle and older, and she was kind of implementing that grandmother atmosphere for the children, but also adding in discipline as she started working with the children and having them act like the little adults that she wanted them to be and actually take on responsibility and actually be well-rounded children. So that's the common theme you're seeing in both of them, is that both of these nannies want the children to be raised with a good role model, and they themselves are trying to be that for the children. But in terms of the discipline that you're going to do, whether or not I said that's spanking or something else, that's something you need to discuss with the parents, because remember, you, the nanny, are an extension of those parents. You're an extension of their values, and what makes their family work. So before you do anything in terms of discipline, you need to make sure you're on the same page.
What do you look for in someone who says to you, I really want to do this work and, I've got the basics down, but should you say to them, look, you're going to have to pick up a little bit of show business here. The kids love shows. You need to sing to them a little bit. You need poetry. You need act outs. You need characters. You need imaginary friends. All of that stuff, even though it looks only like fun, those are great tools of the trade inside the afternoon schedule, inside the tasks that we said before. Mary Poppins reminds us every task should have some fun. How good of a performer should the nanny be, or be prepared to be, to give the kids that real experience?
It goes back to the interview process and looking at the background of that nanny. Some nannies are coming to you with a ton of experience, even, education. They've got master's degrees, they've got different things, and they've mastered this idea of childcare. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they've mastered the idea of play or imagination. I happen to always lead with that. That was my thing as a nanny. It was always imagination. It was always pushing them outside of the box in that way, because I like to say that all of these different things that you see happen in the world, all of these people have these amazing ideas, these amazing inventions. The reason why that's happening is because someone allowed them to use their imagination. Someone told them that was important, to think outside the box and be different and to see the world differently. And so I love looking at little kids and thinking, what could they create? What could they be? And so this idea of fun and education is very important. I try to connect education with play all the time. That's how they learn. So if that's important to you as a parent when hiring your nanny, talk about that specifically. Talk about what education means to you. Does that mean that it's strictly book, or does that mean that it's involving imagination as well? That does that mean puppets and interesting outings that they'll go do in museums and that kind of cultural education too. Decide what education means to you when hiring a nanny, because that's always going to vary.
Now, when you look at the ones that have played the great nannies, and again, I guess we're all going to measure all the performances by Julie Andrews, because Mary Poppins, I just think, was so formative in our culture, in our generation. But still, you've got Mrs. Doubtfire, you've got Nanny McPhee, you've got Uptown Girls, the film, and you have Karina, who I believe, isn't that Whoopi Goldberg, who is Karina?
Yes,
yeah,
Whoopi Goldberg.
I'd be so afraid of that voice. Honest to God, if I was a kid, I'd hide under the stairs. Don't let that woman in here. But she's sweet in the movie. She has a lot of genuineness. So of all those films, which one are you the most comfortable if people say, oh, I know what you do, Florence, because I saw Mary Poppins or I saw Mrs. Doubtfire. Which one are you the most comfortable with as a film ambassador for this great, great profession?
A film ambassador, I'm going to go with Mary Poppins. But if I could make a little baby, a little nanny baby, I would put together Mary Poppins and Nanny McPhee. And I know that might seem strange to some people, because I get this question all the time about Nanny McPhee. If the attractiveness level of Emma Thompson in that movie is important, does that scare the children? And I think a great lesson is to be learned there about not judging a book by its cover, and that beauty is, in the eye of the beholder, and that, we're working on, emotional connections here as well. And children, learn from a young age. They take their cues from those around them about how you treat a person. And I'd like to think that we're going to raise children in this world that are more gentle and kind and tolerant, and accepting. So if I could put Mary Poppins and Nanny McPhee together, that, the discipline of Mary Poppins, that the sophistication of Mary Poppins, and also the magic of Nanny McPhee, and the loyalty there, I think that's a beautiful movie. Those are all beautiful themes, and that's what I would use as an ambassador in terms of nanny movies.
You are so much fun to hang out with. You're making me think, I wish I could go back in time and have you as a nanny. I bet people say this to you all the time. The book came out last year. Oh, come on. You know it. You have a magic yourself. We're talking about Mary Poppins and Mrs. Doubtfire and all these other films, and you possess this magic, and we get it every time we visit with you. The book is Nanny and Me. It came out last year. You should get a copy of it. It's on Mascot Books. Go to WindyCityNanny.com, just the way it sounds, WindyCityNanny.com, and reach out to our guest, Florence Ann Romano, the Windy City Nanny. I'm telling you, I feel like I want to hang out one day with you doing your thing as a fly on the wall. It would be so much fun to watch you interact. You spent 15 years as a nanny. So as our closing question, how does it feel to you, looking back now on those experiences, as what was the most valuable part of the relationship for you? What do you take away from the 15 years of being with these marvelous kids, being such a great influence in their life? What has it done for you, Florence?
Well, first of all, you've made me cry with those beautiful words, so I'll try to compose myself. The most valuable thing I've learned is that life is beautiful, and if you look through the children's eyes and you see life through these children, you're going to learn everything you need to know. I learned the most valuable lessons of my life through those kids, and I use it every single day. The kindness, the uncensored qualities, the cuddle qualities, the love, the attention, just everything that is, spicy and sweet and magical about these kids has affected me. And so I take them with me everywhere I go, and I'd like to think that I am a more compassionate and kinder soul because each of them have imprinted me. So that's what I've taken away.
Don't you think? I think that's what I hear. I think that each one of them has given you a little gentle extra something. And of course, a lot of it goes back into them, but there's no doubt that, as you said, what a beautiful word you used, there's an imprint on you from these unique experiences. So I'm going to tell you now as we say goodbye how you make us feel, all right? I'm sure the audience is going to agree with me. I would love to grab my blanket and know that you're coming over. That's what I used to, whenever I had a babysitter, I used to grab my blanket. I used to have my Aunt Addie used to babysit for me, and my cousin Dolores used to babysit for me. And that was the only two I knew. But I would greet them. My mom would say, Aunt Addie's coming soon. Your father and I, and they'd be getting ready. My parents had their coats on, and there I was with my blanket. Because I wanted to pronounce my blanket was important. Aunt Addie wasn't just going to be with me. She was going to be with my blanket and me. So you are blanket certified from where I am sitting.
Thank you. That's the best thing I've ever heard because, those items mean a lot to children. That's their security. And you were associating your security with your aunt. And that oh gosh, isn't that beautiful? That's a goosebump factor right there.
It is. Really is. It is. I got them too. All right. I can't wait till you're back on the show. I can't wait till I'm in Chicago next time because I'm calling to say hi to my favorite guest in the Windy City.
And I love every minute talking to you. What a day. I am so lucky. What a lucky girl I am. So thank you for having me. You've touched my heart so much. So
you bet. You bet. Florence Ann Romano, the Windy City Nanny. Go to WindyCityNanny.com. All right, we have